been with the organisation now for just coming up to 6.5 years, and I'm responsible for working with organisations to really help them evaluate Google Cloud technology to understand how it could transform the way in which their organisation works. Over the last few months, we've obviously all seen an entirely different way of working, not just in our professional lives, but in our personal lives as well. So we really wanted to give an insight into what we've seen across the retail industry and share some of those stories with Net Primacy, but also with some special guest speakers as well this morning. Just before we get started, a few small housekeeping rules. I can see that everybody's following the first one already, which is great. On the other two, we'll be recording this session for distribution, so you'll have access to this content following the webinar this morning as well. Any questions you have, please feel free to drop them into the link that we have at the top of this slide deck. We really want this to be an interactive session, so please feel free to drop anything through, and we'll pick them up as we reach the Q&A session a little bit later on in the session. I'll be joined this morning by Martin Russell from Net Privacy and also Becky from Google, who've kindly given some time to join us. So guys, please feel free to introduce yourself quickly.
Sure. Thanks, Ben. Hey, everybody. Good morning. My name is Martin Russell. I'm the Director of Customer Success for Net Primacy. I've been around for about a year now in the business, and this is the first time I've been on the sort of services side of the world. The last 20 years of my career have been in the enterprise space, where I've been the director of technology for companies like Just Eat and MetaPack, highly in that retail space about connecting big retail businesses with the carrier network that's out there, focused on platform engineering, operations, cloud journeys, and I've now made that switch into customer success to ensure that those businesses that have gone down the Google Cloud journey are getting the most from that experience and the most from that technology to really sweat the asset, change business and culture, and focus on really delivering the change they wanted for the reasons they went in that direction in the first place. So yeah, that's me.
Cool. Hi everyone, I'm Bex. I'm one of the industry managers here at Google Cloud, looking after the retail patch. I've been working in the retail space for the last kind of 10 years or so. Prior to joining Google 2 years ago, I spent 8 years at Experian as head of retail, and role for me today is really just to share some stories with you that I'm hearing on the ground from the retail customers that I'm working with.
Perfect. Thanks, Becky. We're also really lucky to be joined by Will Rhodes from DFS and Francis Bullman from Morrison's this morning. So if you guys wanted to just drop a quick intro in as well, that'd be superb.
Sure, yeah. Morning, everyone. I'm Will Rhodes from DFS. I'm a program manager there. One of my key projects over the last couple of years has been integrating Google across the DFS group.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Francis. I work within the digital and innovation team at Morrison's with a primary focus on innovation. Been here 3 years now, working right across our retail, manufacturing and logistics operations, including our central functions as well. Previously within the NHS, and prior to that within the travel industry, a number of years traveling the world with TUI. I used to look out my window and stare across Lake Garda. Now I look out my window in Bradford and I can see the Hovis factory. There's one for you.
I won't ask you which one you prefer, Francis. Perfect, guys. Thanks for that. Just moving on, I guess, to the agenda for the session, I'll be giving a brief intro to Net Primacy. Becky will then be talking through some of the trends that she's been seeing actually across retail from a Google perspective. Becky's worked in the retail space for a number of years, so she'll be sharing her insights, not just from herself, but across Google Cloud as a whole. Martin Russell will then be touching on how Net Primacy has been supporting our customer base over the last few months. We've transitioned to a very aggressive support model to make sure that people have been able to transition smoothly to this new way of working. So we'll be sharing some insights from what we've seen across the market space as well. We'll then be fortunate enough to have Will and Francis answering a Q&A session, talking around their experiences of COVID and how they've transitioned to this new way of working. Please feel free to ask these guys any questions. Both probably had 2 different experiences during this process, so any questions you have, please feel free to drop them into the link as well. Just to give you guys a brief introduction to Net Primacy, we've been in the partner space now since 2006, and we're actually involved since the partner channel first became alive as such. So from our perspective, we've really grown up alongside Google as their Google Cloud practice has. We're purely focused on Google Cloud as an organization, and that sits across G Suite, Google Chrome, and Google Cloud Platform, as well as complementary technologies that really add value to the service that we're offering our customer base. And our key driver as a partner is really allowing organizations to leverage and implement this technology to really enable them to differentiate themselves, into the markets in which they work in. If we look at G Suite specifically, which we're focusing on mostly today, we recognize the importance of continued investment in the space. So we're there as a partner from that initial discovery piece, understanding how it would work and sit within the organization, through the initial implementation bit, which is so key and so important, as we really value and see these projects as business change as opposed to just being a technical driven piece of work. We then move on to, I guess, the aftercare piece, and where we see our strategic partnership really coming into fruition, which is where Martin and his team really work with our customer base on this ongoing innovation side of things to really help ensure that adoption piece continues as we move forward and as the product continues to evolve. We're actually really proud as well to be recognised for our work in this area and our investment over the last decade, and we're really proud to have been awarded the Global Partner Award for Work Transformation Enterprise by Google earlier on this year, which really recognises and showcases our efforts and our focus in the G Suite space and what we've achieved with our partners and customers over that period of time. And I think it's probably fair to say that this partnership first approach that we've taken has never been more important over the last few months, and we'll be talking around that and how that's worked a little bit later on. Before I hand over to Becky, I just wanted to give you guys a brief snapshot of some of the organizations that we've worked with and partnered with over the last decade. I'm really proud to show this slide. I think it shows some amazing logos that have adopted Google Cloud technology, and we're really proud to partner with these organizations. What I find most amazing is how it's really enabled us to create this community culture amongst our customers. The value is obviously there from that premises side, but our customers are really grateful that they can share their experiences and share their problems actually with organizations that they typically wouldn't engage with previously. So we're really proud and pleased to be able to share this model amongst our customers. So just on this piece, again, thank you to DFS and Morrison for taking the time to join us today to share their experiences during this period of time as well. Becky, I'll hand over to you to start to give some insights, please, from a Google side.
Sure. Thank you. So I'm going to be helping frame today's discussion with a few, as I said, anecdotes and stories of how my retail clients are responding to, well, the first major pandemic taking place in the digital world. And that's going to be a mix of both bricks and clicks retailers, as well as some of the kind of the pure play e-commerce brands that I'm working with at the moment. So I'm going to run you through 3 key use cases that I'm seeing most frequently in this space. I wanted to start with use case number 1, which is really around sort of empowering teams to transform the customer and or user experience. So as retailers are relying on their at-home workforce to stay connected and maintain productivity, we've seen massive surges in the use of Google Meets. Actually, daily usage at the moment is actually more than 25 times bigger than what it was in January of this year, which is pretty wild. And one common story I'm hearing across my customer base is around accelerating the collaboration between frontline workers and, even call center employees with their head office. For those of you that are already familiar with G Suite, you'll know that AI is embedded fundamentally in all of the products. And I think the Explore functionality in Google Sheets is a really, really good example of this. High street retailer that I'm working with at the moment is currently trading really, really well in one specific category that they sell. And it's a category that is serving the nation particularly well right now in all of their fitness endeavors, let's call it. The customer service teams are using the Explore functionality in Google Sheets to really quickly analyze their business data in that specific outdoor fitness category in just a few clicks. So, for example, what I mean by that is stuff like, what sizes and styles of these fitness products are in stock and at what level, so that they can then go and report back to the customers and manage expectations around things like, click and collect in the stores that are open and when they can expect deliveries in their local stores. Sheets is basically in this scenario allowing them to get super close to their business, and as we all know, ultimately more knowledgeable and engaged employees directly contribute to better customer experience. they're also using Sheets in a bit of a different way to coordinate work schedules for their night shifts in their warehouses to maintain all of the social distancing rules. And I think that's a really nice example to call out, because not only is that keeping all of their employees safe and healthy, but it's also avoiding any delivery delays for customers as well. And I think right now in kind of the retail environment, this is really important in the current climate where retailers need to compete primarily on service and customer experience rather than price, because obviously the latter is so much more difficult to compete on now with the likes of, you know, Amazon and the growth of the discount retailers as well. So kind of really doubling down on competing on service rather than price is something that I'm seeing massively. And then next slide, please, Ben. So the second one I wanted to talk about was the ability to move super fast. I think that everyone would probably agree on this call that having a competitive edge is more important now than ever. Brands are really, really having to work much harder for their share of wallet. And I think with that in mind, the ability to be super reactive to customer needs is critical. I have a retailer at the moment that I'm working with who has a huge amount of suppliers across India, China, and across all of Europe as well. And they need to collaborate in real time with these suppliers so they can best manage their orders and deliveries and ultimately keep their customers happy. They're using Google Docs to communicate with their suppliers across all of these different time zones. And because obviously everything is updated in real time for those of you that are already using Google Docs, this avoids them having to wait for suppliers to wake up and then, you know, bring them up to speed on all of their emails, and then in tandem eliminates all of the back and forth with various attachments and iterations of documents and so on. And I think that in addition to this, the benefit of G Suite being device agnostic is quite important as well, because that comes into play as a lot of their suppliers and partners will have the same seamless experience across a lot of different devices that they might be using, which is often the case for suppliers and partners to be using different tools and systems to my customers as well. Next slide, please. So the last use case I wanted to call out here is really around sort of providing remote training and upskilling opportunities for employees. We're obviously starting to see the way shoppers consuming information shift massively, primarily through lack of choice, obviously, because they don't really have any at the moment with not being able to shop offline. So as an example of that, it's not really just around the way we're shopping, but it's actually the way that we're consuming information as a whole. So YouTube watch time was actually up 28% last week, which I thought was a really interesting stat. And that just kind of goes to demonstrate that consumers are just becoming much more comfortable with educating themselves online through these online channels and platforms, as well as the actual transactions themselves too. So we announced last month that we'd be providing at-home learning with 30 days of training at no cost. And we've had just under, I think the latest figures are just under 100,000 learners leverage the offer through our on-demand courses, our hands-on labs, and our cloud on-air webinars. And I think that this online learning is something that I've seen my customers take advantage of in a particularly brilliant way, really just to make sure that their teams are upskilled and supporting their businesses bouncing back in the best possible way, sort of post COVID. I'm working with a couple of CTOs at the moment who've been providing their teams with things like, you know, Coursera logins, Pluralsight logins, Quick Labs, and then having team hangouts at the end of all of these either courses or quests to have team debriefs on all of the learnings. And then as a secondary benefit to that, the ability to then record and share those team meetings securely has been super useful to, you know, really quickly and efficiently scale the learnings across the whole organization. So those are kind of the key, at least some of the key ways that I'm seeing retailers pivot to this crisis using Google Tech. So just to summarize there, it's number one, as a facilitator to drive sort of better customer experience and user experience, because that is primarily one of the key ways that retailers can compete now. Number two is the ability to move really fast and be super reactive to a situation that is often changing daily. Number three, given that everyone is so much more comfortable shopping and learning through online channels, a lot of retailers are doing a really fantastic job of taking advantage of our platforms to do this. And then I think just as kind of a final comment, really more broadly, the sentiment on the ground amongst retailers is that, you know, a big part of purchasing behaviors in retail historically have been about passion and the desire for products and trends in this space, especially for those of you that may work in the luxe and the high-end space. But given how much more cautious we'll be as shoppers, brands are really starting to think about how they're going to revive that passion and how do they kind of reactivate that in a really sensitive way. And what I've seen is that Google Tech is, in a few examples, has been a really good enabler at helping brands to brainstorm ideas around how actually they're going to be serving an entirely different customer than they were before. I think in this space, in retail, demand recovery is going to be very unpredictable. I think it's going to vary across different geographies, different categories and different customer segments, and you're going to need to collaborate really quickly to work towards, right sizing your cost base and getting businesses back up and running. Hopefully you'll agree that a lot of the ideas and the use cases that I've called out here is that one of the benefits is that they can move quite seamlessly into a retailer's ecosystem and ways of working long after lockdown. So hopefully you'll see that they're scalable and they're long term, and they'll help you weather the climate long after this crisis. So that was really my 3 key points.
Thanks, Bex. That's good stuff. So I shall continue by giving you just a quick bit of insight to what customer success is at Net Premises, and then how we've had to adapt and change ourselves to the world we find ourselves in, and then therefore how that's then played in with the customers that we help. So what is customer success for me? Customer success for me is those businesses that have chosen to go down the Google Cloud journey, ensuring that, well into the life longevity of that they are sweating that asset as much as possible. They have embedded it into the DNA of how that business operates. These aren't fire and forget projects. These are things that need to live on for a long time, because the depth and breadth of that technology is so much so that you can get an awful lot out of it, not just from a tech point of view, but from a behavioral and cultural change as well within your businesses. And that's what our CSS program does. It talks to you about, what is that light on the hill that we want to head for, both in your business and us as your partner in that. How are we going to get there? How are we going to measure that we're going in the right direction, that we're getting the changes that we desired, and ultimately achieve the objective that we have? The reality is, we find ourselves in a very unique situation where actually thinking about the next 12 months and beyond is really difficult at the moment, right? We're much more in a tactical stance because the situation that has presented itself to us has meant that a lot of businesses have had to react very quickly. If you were to go back 14 weeks and ask businesses, many, hey, you're going to go to a complete remote working situation in the blink of an eye, and we've had those conversations with some, they would never have had a clue of how to do it. And I think the reality is, I've kind of kinned it there to the old classic of forming, storming, and performing, right? Businesses in that initial first 2 weeks were, sending people home in taxis with PCs and, quickly going out and buying desks from IKEA so people could go and set up at home. There was lots of that kind of, how do we even do this? How does the technology, what do we need to do around Chrome management? What do we need to do about MDM for mobile? What do we need to do about a whole bunch of things? Lots of activity to get that initial kind of, hey, we can actually do it, and then there's the storming piece around. So the forming piece. Okay, we're doing it now. There's loads of problems to solve, but we're actually working in that way. And I think a lot of businesses now that are in that sort of 8, 10, 11, 12 weeks later are actually finding that they're thriving in it, right? And that's actually really positive. And I think it leads to a future of a very much of a blended model. So what have we done around this? We've, so like I said, moved from that, hey, absolutely. I mean, I'm a vision guy, right? I love talking about strategy and vision and what it is in the future, but absolutely there's a time and place to be tactical. And we've done that with the customers that we work with. So thinking about what is in the immediate sort of viewpoint that we need to focus on, security being a big one around, okay, you've now got people working from anywhere, potentially with a device you haven't provided them. So how do we use tools like the Chrome management piece and MDM to ensure that data isn't being lost or insecure, or even DLP, lots of the tooling that people probably weren't too aware of in the back end of the sort of, G Suite platform or even GCP that they could have been using to secure that data better, because I never thought they'd have to be in a world that they're in today. We've published papers for the COVID-19 pack that we've done. We've done one publicly, which I'm sure we can share a link to those on the call if you've not already seen it from us, which highlights a lot of these areas to help your business operate in this space. And then an even more in-depth paper that we've done with our actual CSS customers that are on board in our program. And it really talks about what are the things that you can do, what are those low-hanging fruit that you can do immediately to give yourself the more comfort blanket that, we're being secure, but we're also educating our employees about what good working remotely looks like. How does Meet assist that? How does document collaboration assist that? How does just, good netiquette, as they used to call it, lots of people now involved in video calls, and I'm not sure, I've never done this sort of work before. Do I raise my hand when I want to talk to someone? How do I not interrupt? How do I capture meetings? How can I still use technologies like Jamboards in a Meet environment so I can still have that whiteboarding collaboration experience that I used to have in the office? Lots of tips and just ways of working that we've built up over years to help those businesses that have probably never gone into this space before make it feel that much easier. Try and bring some of that office environment home in a remote respect so that people can work in that collaborative way. So lots of focus on that tactical piece, as I said before, the COVID, and then the employee feedback. I think this one is super important for me, especially now, right? Because when you're in that storming piece, it's a lot of excitement, a lot of can we? Yes, we can. Or this is actually quite well. When you get into that 8, 9, 10 plus weeks, that's when a bit of lethargicness can settle in, a bit of when are we going back, I don't like this, or this, I'm still struggling with things I didn't get addressed in the first place. So opening up to your employees and putting a feedback loop in place, asking them what's working for them, what's not working with them, and ensuring that you close that feedback loop. We've heard, we've listened, we're doing this, we're going to improve situations for you. And it's super important you do that, because if you don't close a feedback loop, don't be surprised that feedback dries up, because if people don't think you're listening, don't think you're reacting, they will just stop giving the feedback, right? Yet if you do close the loop and say, we listened, you specifically say to them, I've heard what you said, and this is what we're doing, you will find more and more feedback coming through, because people go, oh, great, I'm being listened to, I'm being understood. People are understanding what my struggle is, and they're fixing it for me. So we've put in a new process within CSS, very specifically around remote working, getting very specific questions out to your sort of employee base, asking them about the experience that they're having, collecting that feedback in, analyzing that data, and then talking about how we then address that. Is that technology? Is that a process? Is that training? Is that some very specific tips around a certain area of a certain technology? And we've done that very successfully with various businesses out there. So it's a bit of a, like I said, that we will get back to the strategy. I think that's coming. I think a lot of people now, especially with the recent news around businesses starting to reopen up again, starting to return to some levels of normal. And of course, it's not going to go back, I think, to what it was before. But these things are starting to come back. We're getting more into the, okay, if we're going into a new blended model, or if anything like this was ever happen again, what would we do differently? How would we be better prepared for that? Let's build that into our strategy for cloud technology, and think about doing some of those things going forward, but also still being very tactical around, if this is prolonged, and if for some businesses that can't go back, this needs to continue for some time, what are those things to ensure, stability, security, scalability of our platforms do we need to be addressing, with both GCP and G Suite? And that's where we're able to help connect businesses. As you saw from the logo slide, right? And there's some great companies in there that we can leverage knowledge from. It's unlikely that you're facing a problem that hasn't already been faced by somebody else. So don't sit there thinking about how you have to reinvent that wheel. Let's connect businesses together to talk about how they potentially can help each other solve those problems, or just gain insight from each other. That you'll be surprised how open people are to sharing these kinds of things. And we leverage that an awful lot within the CSS program that we operate. So yeah, that's a bit from me. I'm always open to questions on this. So I think there was constantly throughout these slides been a question link. So if you have any, please raise them. But otherwise, I think now, Ben, we're going to jump into talking with Will and Francis, right?
That's good.
Yeah. I will continue talking, so you have to continue to listen to my voice. I'll try and shut up as much as I can and let Will and Francis do the talking. But yes, so the thing I was going to kick off with, guys, if you're okay with it, it's a bit of a general question first, then I might jump in.
No, sorry, I'm just on a webinar. Sorry.
Oh, hey, Stuart, we don't mind putting yourself on mute for you, buddy. Yes, so I'll kick off with Francis and Will. So Will, if you wouldn't mind just jumping in first, then Francis, so we don't have to keep unmuting each other. What surprised you most about sort of this period of remote working?
So I think what surprised me most actually is how well the business has adapted. Because we have had this technology in place and had it in place for a year, the business were really able to quickly pick this up. So Hangouts, for example, people were well versed in it, knew how to use it. So it wasn't really a big cultural change for people who worked in head office, for example, to move on to that. What has surprised me is how well people sort of outside of the head office, we have our own factories, we have our own delivery service, how those other users who wouldn't spend much time on this technology have actually embraced it really well. So the use of Hangouts, I mean, obviously has become massive throughout the whole organization, whereas a lot of those people actually wouldn't have had the need to use it. So for example, our factories didn't have Hangout kits in there. So just before we had to lock down, we visited those factories, installed Hangout kits in all those factories to stop people having to move from location to location, potentially spreading the virus, but being able to carry on working as close to normal as possible.
Great, thank you. And Francis, the same.
I think obviously Morrison's has been in a very different state of affairs to everybody else, in that as key workers, we've had to continue working, actually being busier than we ever have in the past. It has been a challenge to get people to adopt Google technology within our business. Culturally, it wasn't the way we've always worked, and myself, along with my team and Net Primacy, have tried for a long time to get people to adopt this way of working. It's only taken a global pandemic for us to finally get there. But echoing what was just said, the use of Google Meet, for example, across the business, we averaged maybe at 200 to 300 Google Meets a day. We peaked last week at 2,200, and in the past 30 days, we've had over 104,000 hours of video meetings across the business. And even shifting from previous statistics showed that we were having 3 times as many people dial into these Google Meets as opposed to using their browser. That has flipped back the other way to 3 times as many people actually using their browsers as opposed to dialing in. I think what surprised me the most is the resilience of Morrison's colleagues, and the pressure that's been put upon them to work in this way at such a critical time for our industry, providing them with these tools to keep communicating, to keep going, to keep motivated. It's been nothing short of astounding, really.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, when you think about it? If I'd gone back 10 years and this sort of thing had happened, it would have been a tech problem, right? It would have been thinking about, how do I ensure that I have enough devices out there with the VPN client, and can my VPN infrastructure manage all these incoming connections, and have I got a big enough pipe at the end, and all the complexities around that. And reality is, today we might have thought it was a technology problem, but it is actually just people change, right? It's actually the tech works, the tech is there. It's just a mindset change. It's a people understanding that they can just turn this stuff on and it will just work and scale accordingly. So it sounds like in both the cases it was that, right? It was we have the faith the tech works. It's just getting people to adopt it. And like you say, Francis, it's funny. It sadly had to take a pandemic to get people to think differently, but it's something that you can now carry forward, right? So that's really, really positive. Will, was there any sort of, like, in those first early days, was there anything you had to sort of do quickly, either with that people process change or technology in those first few days?
Yeah, definitely quickly. You mentioned devices there. That was a really key issue for us. So we have our own call center and a lot of people on fixed machines. We needed to keep the call center up and running because we knew, customers were going to be calling in, asking where is my order, etc. So we had to get that call center up and running remotely. Obviously, in order to do that, we had to distribute a lot of machines to those users at the same time as distributing them to lots of other users as well in other departments. So that was particularly challenging for us. Fortunately, we were able to deliver Chrome devices to a lot of those users. So we'd already carried out a trial probably 3 or 4 months earlier, and we'd chosen a couple of Chrome devices because they're actually now our device of choice. So the Chromebooks that we're able to give to our users, we have very high confidence in them. So what that enabled us to do is basically speed up that process. So if we have to build a Windows machine, for example, that would take the IT service desk 4 to 4.5 hours. With a Chromebook, we can do it in less than 30 minutes, and that's probably about 15 minutes if I'm being honest. So that means we can get a device in, usually from a supplier, within a day. It hits our IT department, we configure the device and send it out within 15 minutes. Now, the Chrome devices aren't suitable for every single scenario, but what it did is it took the pressure off building lots of Windows machines that had particular applications that ran on them. So that was a real positive with this, is to be able to spin a device up, give it to somebody and enable them to work from home, within a couple of hours. Is fantastic for an IT department that was under a considerable amount of pressure at that time.
Yeah, it's a different world, isn't it? To what it used to be. What's support been like? Has it seen a significant increase in support calls? Is it been quite intuitive for users to use?
Yeah, so the devices are intuitive for people to use. So we don't get any calls really regarding how to use the device once you show somebody how to log in, because it's so simple and everything's browser based, and we've taken a strategic approach to move as many of our applications to make them work on browsers. So that's meant we as a business have been in a good position. There are still some applications that we haven't done, which means some departments may still need a Windows device, but the devices are really easy to use. I'm sat on one now speaking to you guys. Absolutely love it. And I know most of our users, certainly as part of the trial that we did, wouldn't hand the devices back, which I think was the acid test, really.
Excellent. And Francis, obviously, like you say, Morrison's key workers, and even my personally, my sister with run a hairdresser. She actually went to work for Morrison's to help out as shelf stacking, being the hairdressing industry took a bit of a nosedive. So I know that there's been a massive uplift in people working in those environments and the throughput in those stores, etc. So, like, and has anything changed in the way that they use the technology, given the significant more about people, both in GCP and G Suite? You talked a little bit about Meet, but any other sort of, collaboration between people have gone up, that sort of thing?
Yes, absolutely. As you said, your sister's gone to work with Morrison. So we have at Pace employed an additional, I think, just short of 30,000 employees during this pandemic, and Net Primacy have had many very last minute phone calls to say we need an additional 10,000 Google licenses. Can you please supply these for us? When do you need them? We could do with them yesterday, please. But it's the fact that we have been able to get a hold of these licenses and enroll people into the business at such short notice. Previously, we've worked in a way in which all recruitment went through head office. The ability to enroll people and get them enrolled in the business out and about in stores, we've actually passed this recruitment element of our business onto the stores so they can recruit themselves, and very quickly they can submit a Google form with a new employee's details, and they're enrolled and set up and good to go across all of the kind of G Suite tools. We have very much utilized Google Currents or Google Plus, as it's still known as. Apologies. We use this across the business anyway for our communication, and we were very quickly able to spin up a virtual help desk for everybody that was removed from head office within 24 hours. You know, our head office holds ballpark 2,000 people, and we got told one day, none of you are coming in tomorrow. So how did we ensure communication with those colleagues to help them with their initial technology challenges that they had, as you mentioned, VPN and so forth? How do we ensure that they had a way of communicating with our tech teams at head office to ensure that their home setup was as it should be? And we used Google Communities for that as a way of we essentially created a group for head office and forced them all into a community, and they all helped each other, which was brilliant. And then probably the most critical use case was Morrison's, as I'm sure you're aware, were able to very quickly set up a doorstep delivery service for the elderly and vulnerable people across the UK. Those people that didn't have access to the internet, that weren't able to create an online order, and were shielding and isolating and unable to get to a store. So we very quickly spun up a call center with 350 plus employees, all working from home using Chrome devices, logging into the call center system to take calls from vulnerable and elderly people, to submit a shopping list for it then to be picked, packed, and delivered from their local store. So I've been on both sides of that. I've taken calls from people who, you know, haven't spoke to anybody in weeks, and were basically in tears giving their order over the phone. And I've also driven the vans from my local store in Elland, and I've delivered it to, you know, to people that, again, haven't spoken to anybody in weeks and weeks and weeks. And we were able to do this by having that kind of cloud technology, those Chrome devices, that ability to get somebody on our system within minutes, and yeah, it's been enormously successful for us.
That's amazing. I didn't actually know that. That's even if we weren't on the webinar, I'd still say I was getting choked, because that's actually what an awesome service to have done for people. Well done. That's yeah, certainly. I wasn't expecting that, so that was really nice. And that, like I say, this has been a crazy time for everyone, right? And to know that there are businesses out there that are doing way above and beyond, you know, to help those people that are vulnerable is amazing. And you know, and to bring it back to the technology, what a world we're in, where you know, 10 years ago, if you'd asked me to, hey, we're going to add 10,000 people to our in-house email solution, I would have freaked out and probably, you know, don't know what I would have done from a storage point of view, from a security point of view, from just an onboarding point of view, all of those questions. And today they're like, yeah, we're talking about toggle flipping, right? We're talking about it's a people process change, not a technology restriction anymore, and that's an amazing place to be in. So great, and thanks for sharing that story. That is very, very nice. So the last one I was going to ask the pair of you was around, you know, before we started the webinar, you know, Will, you talked about sort of DFS's, you know, starting to reopen stores, and obviously Morrison's have been working through this throughout anyway, and offering that service. So you've started to plan already, you know, what does the new normal look like for you guys? And maybe you can give some early indications to what you think. You know, obviously you don't have to talk about products and how that's going to work, so that will obviously be changing forever. But maybe some of that sort of how people are going to work together. What is the maybe some of the new normals you think you're going to see and carry over from this period of time? Will, do you want to jump in first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the new normal will be working from home. To be honest, I think people have realised now that actually they don't have to travel, they don't have to be in the office all the time. I spoke to a member of the learning management team yesterday. He said, he can't see a reason why he needs to be back in the office because he can do everything he needs to do from home. Now, I know people, won't do that, but I think the realization it doesn't have to spend 5 days in the office every single week will make a big difference. And not only that for individuals, but what we noticed before we went on lockdown was, we had some group leadership meetings. We've obviously got, DFS have got 4 brands, so we have 4 head offices across the country. When the senior leadership team from across the group meet, that's a lot of people travelling to one location, and there's a lot of cost associated to that, and there's a lot of time, people's time associated to that as well. What we did before we went on lockdown was we set up hangouts. We had 90 people from the leadership team on those hangouts so that they didn't have to travel. And I think going forward, that will become more of the norm. I think potentially, if they have 12 senior meetings per year across the group, I think, maybe 3 or 4 of them will become face-to-face meetings, and the rest will become, hangouts. We've set the hangout kits up in all our head offices now, which we didn't have. So prior to lockdown, I think going forward then, the senior management team, whether it's potentially a board meeting or, whatever that may be, people will start to use the technology a lot more and not travel, which I think is a great thing, not only for the environment, but for people's, own well-being as well, and own time. We don't want to spend 2 or 3 hours on a motorway travelling from, Surrey, for example, all the way up to Doncaster. So yeah, I think that's going to make a real difference to those kind of group meetings.
Excellent. Francis, what about yourself?
Yeah, I don't just want to echo what you said there, but it's very true. Morrison's head office has historically 2,000 people in it on a daily basis. We've now, due to social distancing, we've limited that to 375. We historically have had hundreds of suppliers through the door every day to meet buyers and to showcase their products and so forth. You imagine the hundreds of thousands of products we sell as a business, and that has gone right the way down to nearly nothing of everybody doing this remotely. If I want to see a product that I'm going to sell in a shop, I don't necessarily need to see it physically now. So, we've recently kitted out, I think about 20 rooms in our head office with the latest kind of Google Meet kit. We're just about to kit out the boardroom and the same. So even the whole executive team have bought into this kind of way of working. It was signed off, I think, last week to kit out every one of our logistics sites with, again, a Google Meet setup. So every site now has the ability to, remove that travel element. I think there definitely will be a 50-50 approach to this, where not everybody actually likes working from home. If I'm completely honest with you, I struggle with it. I'm sat at a kind of kitchen bench here now. The dog and kid are running around like lunatics outside. I've locked it and told them they have to stay out until 12 o'clock. As I'm looking out in the baking sun may not have been the the best thing to do. It's chaos outside. But a lot of what I do within my role involves kind of talking to people, and that kind of face-to-face understanding exactly what they're thinking, and you can't always do that via a hangout. We made a joke about it earlier on of, at the moment I'm sat here with a shirt and a collar on, but I'm in my shorts. So you get that, you don't get that kind of real feel as to what's going on. So I think it will definitely be a blended approach for us. But one of the last bits I want to mention that I think has been very useful for us is Will mentioned around the learning and development team and the training, the way in which we train. Our training teams to travel all over the country to multiple. We have 19 manufacturing sites. We've got 9 logistics locations, 500 stores, and they travel around to perform training face to face at these sites. We've actually utilized Google's Classroom offering for this. We started it as a bit of a trial about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it's been enormously successful by planning remote training. and even allowing us now for the first time ever to actually provide this training for teams that work overnight. Because actually, your overnight trainings are like we can record a daytime session, and it just takes one person to play it back to a night team and ask the questions. So we've really utilized Google Classroom to actually help us educate our colleagues better.
It's brilliant. It is so funny that it does take an event for action to take place, right? But because that's all the stuff that everyone's just mentioned is things that you've had. So Currents and Classroom and Meet and all of those technologies have been there since the beginning. They've been there since you've had the technology. But it takes like that kind of igniter, that spark, as I talk about it in sort of other things that I do, to make what, we could start doing this, and then all of a sudden, hopefully, that will be continue to be adopted. So the story around using Currents earlier, you would hope that well beyond this event, that is now part of the culture of that social networking within Morrison's continues to be used and continues to be adopted. It is super cool that's kind of some of the really positive outputs of all of this situation that we find ourselves in. That's great. So that was probably sort of my last question, but we've had a couple come through. As long as you guys are okay to just answer a couple more, we've had some come through, and I think you've maybe answered them anyway. But one was around the sort of the cultural change. So as you said, Francis, I come to you on this one. Absolutely, working from home is different for everybody, right? Everyone has a different setup. Some people don't have a home office. Some people are literally working from their armchair, and that's great for a week. It's maybe not that great for much longer than that. And also, some people really thrive from being in the room with the person they work with because they have the banter, the interactions that they would normally get. So have you guys done much to try and keep the culture of Morrison's going, even in this remote way of working? And have you used the technologies to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think very early on, I got to the point where I took my Fitbit off because I realized that I was doing less than 800 steps a day, and I thought if I take it off, then I have no idea how lazy I'm being, as opposed to it being flashing in my face. And we've used we've had kind of regular meetings every single morning, 8 o'clock, coffee, whole team having a coffee, not talking about work. It's given us that kind of driver to get out of bed and be on time for something. We've probably utilized it in the same way that every person across the country has with Zoom and other technologies around kind of social events as well, and quizzes and things like that, to ensure that people are just staying in touch. Google Chat is used widely across our business anyway, but having rooms set up to ensure that messaging is kept going and contact is kept going. And we've actually been we very much encouraged on a few occasions a bit of a, I'm gonna sound daft, but a bit of a team walk, where we're not walking all together, but people connected via Hangouts have gone for a walk around their local park with their headset on and have just spoken to each other. So anything we can do to encourage people to get off of their chair, get off of their armchair, or get out of their bed, and we've used the tools to the best that we possibly can.
I like the idea of the sort of hangout walk or the meet walk. That's quite cool. I like that. I've not thought of that one, but that's a nice thing to do. Maybe that's a good one for like one-to-ones, right? Go for a walk and have a one-to-one with your manager whilst you're out both walking in the local park. That's
absolutely
cool one.
Get those steps in.
Yeah. Will, what about yourself? Anything you've kind of done there to help keep the DFS culture going?
Similar, really. We've held quizzes, obviously, and I think the fact that Google increased the license number for our license to 250 people to be on a quiz, and that's been really good. So we've run a few of those. The things I don't know really how the other individual teams have done, but from our team perspective, it's the regular calls, the regular contact. My chat is filled up every day, and that's the way to that's become our standard way to communicate. And then we have our regular meetings by Hangout, so we're all in touch. We all get to see each other, and it's kind of been business as usual, really. I think it was last week that our boss basically said, we can continue to work as we are for as long as possible. We're set up to carry on in this way, we have a strong team anyway and a good culture. So that's just been maintained throughout this period.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, that's amazing to hear that when you've got your sort of senior leaders are like, you know what, this actually works. Again, you go back a few years, there were always questions around, is cloud enterprise ready? Can it do this? And the reality is, yes, it was. You just had to, you couldn't dip your toe into it. You've got to immerse yourself in it and really get to grips with it, understand it, and then play that into your culture of your business. So it's really great to see that so many businesses have, regardless of the other side of the coin, which is also, which is terrible, but the actual being able to perform in this state is for some absolutely flown, really. So that is super positive. One last one, which is coming from John Sibley, Francis, and it's for you. Right back at the beginning of our conversation, you talked about sort of, some people at Morrison's a bit sort of reluctant to use the technology, for G Suite or take it on. The question is, like, was that more of a general dislike of kind of that way of working or that type of technology or the change and obviously, what's helped that sort of transition over?
I think there's multiple reasons. Morrison's historically, Sir Ken Morrison, bless him, he never really believed in technology. Being a grocer was a simple. It was simple. You give me some money and I'll give you some goods in return. That was it. Didn't need to invest in tech, and it's bit us on the backside in the long run, I guess. But now, as we are starting to adopt it, there's a lot of people that still remember the old way of working, and actually, it's taken us to entice the exec team into embracing the technology first to allow that to dribble down. So, for example, for the first time ever, our Q1 results, which went on, I think, in April, were historically they were delivered by an atrium event where the chief exec stands in our atrium and everybody kind of gathers round and he tells people how we've got on as he's released it to the city. This time, for the first time, it was done via a live stream using Google Meet Kit set up in a room, and we broadcast that stream to all the opportunity for all 120,000 plus employees to view his update live. And by seeing our exec team do that, that has now kind of trickled down throughout the business, and all of our directors and heads of are using live streams on a weekly basis to keep their team updated, as opposed to your standard email out and here's what's going on. They're now doing it and using, like you've got here, the Q&A option as a part of the slide pack for people to engage, and it's engaging with everybody. So once they've seen that our exec team have moved with the times, they're buying into it themselves. Previously there was people walking around the building with iPads and their own machines, and we're stuck with Apple. Well, stick a Pixel book in front of them, and it's amazing how quickly they change their tune. So it's getting those senior people to buy into it first and foremost has definitely helped adoption throughout the rest of the business.
It's such a great point because that's how it is, right? It's the old adage, it's monkey see, monkey do. If everyone around me is not acting in this way, why would I act in this way? And as a change person, you're trying to drive that change. But like you say, if you're seeing the leadership aren't doing it, why are you expecting anyone else in the business to do it? They will see that activity and see that behavior and adopt that behavior. That's what they do. So it couldn't be a more sort of poignant point that if you want to see a change, you've got to get those people that everyone looks up to be also adopting that change, because you've got no hope otherwise. So thank you. It's a great answer and a really poignant point. So that leads me just to say thanks to the pair of you for this chat. Hopefully it didn't feel too much like an interview, more of a conversation about the cool stuff that's been going on in the world with the technology we've been using. Thank you both for being so open to discussion on it. Ben, I shall hand back to you and shut up.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Just to echo that, I guess personally from myself, really appreciate it, Francis and Will. It's really insightful to hear this from your perspective, and I speak for Net Primacy when I said it. We really value the partnership, so thank you for that. It's appreciated. That sort of concludes the webinar, guys. So in terms of next steps, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to drop them through to my email address. That will be shared through afterwards. and we'll be providing a recording, as I mentioned at the start of the webinar. So for myself and everybody on the call, thank you very much, and of course stay safe, and we'll speak soon.
Thanks everyone. Take care.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.